Okay, it's funny. But if more of our soldiers had the attitude of the Black Knight, a lot more of them would be alive today. Movies like this are mostly just funny acting, not reality based. But how many times have we seen in real life war situations the people with a stronger moral basis usually win? People with strong fundamental principles, especially those who have a stronger moral basis in the battle, because they're fighting to defend their lives and their freedom, not fighting in offense, but defense, tend to win, even when extremely outnumbered. When people have been taught not to fear, but have faith and believe, a little bit like the Black Knight, there's at least one historical war where not one single soldier died, even though they were outnumbered by the thousands. Many were wounded, but not one died. Another thing was, they said their mothers taught them that if they believed, they would be okay. And they believed their mothers. They had good mothers. Tell you what, look at Moses, and who was his mentor? A woman. It was his aunt. Look at history of amazingly great women who have been part of this. My grandmother taught me, my mom's mom, that as long as you're not having any fear, you'll be fine, as long as you're not afraid. The second you ever get afraid, watch out. That's when you get hurt. As long as you have faith, as long as you believe that you're okay, you're fine. Remember the phrase, sink or swim? Have you ever tried swimming across the lake without a life preserver? Full speed? And when you get about halfway across, like I have, and you're breathing as hard as you can, and your heart's beating as fast as it can go, just to stay afloat. So you look back, and it's just as far away to turn back as it is to keep going forward. And you realize that there's no one around to help you, and you don't have a life preserver. And you realize again and again, and with the first few moments that pass by, you're breathing as hard as you can, and your heart's beating as fast as it can go just to stay afloat. Now, if you panic, the fear dilates blood capillaries faster than anything. All of a sudden, out come the blood proteins with the excess fluid around your cells, and it doesn't matter how hard you're breathing or that your heart's beating as fast as it can go. It doesn't matter how much oxygen is in your blood. The excess fluid around your cells pushes them too far out of range to receive the oxygen in the blood, and you sink like a rock. Faith is an intelligent force that prevents the blood capillaries from dilating. The truth is, if we just relax on our back a bit and take one stroke at a time and one breath at a time without entertaining any fear, the oxygen supply in the blood increases, our muscles begin to relax, and our heart rate calms down. For those who know how to swim, we can swim about as long and far as we would ever want to if we just know how to pace ourselves and have faith. Fear versus faith. Faith is an intelligent force. Fear teaches people to be quiet. And how many abusers have said, "Don't you dare ever tell anyone or I'll kill you." Abusers try to manipulate people with fear. How many times have we seen this? How long has this been going on? What about abuse of governments, corporations, or others who control the government's abuse? From silly things to serious things, in many areas where it's unnecessary. It's a disruption of peace. Again, George Washington said, "The marvel of all history is the patience with which men and women submit to burdens unnecessarily laid upon them by their governments." It is the purpose of government to enforce our laws of peace. Our government is not supposed to legislate morality. Legislating morality is what canon law, religion, and God is for. It's time for governments to leave that between the people and God. But it's also time for us to stand up and speak up. Separation of church and state was supposed to protect us as individual citizens as well as the church from government, not the other way around. You know? As a matter of natural law, how can we give our government any power that we ourselves don't already possess? And look what's just happened with marriage laws in the United States. I think divorce attorneys in the United States just doubled their business. One of the reasons gay and lesbian communities have had so much money is because they haven't been losing it in divorce. Just so you know, I'm completely straight, and I have lost just about everything in a divorce. A house to foreclosure, my perfect credit, and more. So in my highly biased opinion, perhaps from my experience, I think it's been a big part of our problem. The first marriage licenses were actually for slaves who had fallen in love. In order to create a license, the licensor must own the thing being licensed to the licensee. Prior to marriage licenses, we had marriage certificates, which were merely a recognition and acknowledgement of the marriage. Through ownership of the marriage, the state owns everything the marriage produces, including the children. This is how the state courts claim jurisdiction and enact the laws of the child. Some people may think it's kind of funny, but it's horrible what they've been doing with the control over marriage, divorce, and the children in court. There shouldn't be any governmental legislation limiting poly or gay or any other similar personal relationships where people are not getting hurt and where people are doing the best to live what they believe is the most peaceful life they can live. Too many of our current monogamous relationships simply failed due to the negativity of burdens unnecessarily laid upon them by their governments. Another book called Exploratory Study of Leadership Perspectives of Bar Association Presidents offers some good insights on our legal system, such as in Massachusetts, one of the earliest provisions prohibited any man from giving a reward to another to represent him in court. Georgia also passed legislation that encouraged every man to plead his own case. In a report by Samuel Everley to the Georgia Colony, he wrote the following: "Causes were tried, and in my judgment, very impartially, without the jargon or the confused quirks of lawyers, and without any costs or charges, and yet, in my opinion, consonant to reason and equity, which I take to be the foundation of all laws." This is in the early 1800s still. Another quote: "Leaders of Massachusetts Bay wish to govern an ideal state. Revolutionary or utopian regimes are generally hostile to lawyers, at least in their first generation. The lawyers of the old regime must be banished. Since a new and ideal commonwealth needs to start with new law and new habits, some colonists who had been depressed in England carried with them a strong dislike for all servants of government. Merchants and planters wished to govern without intermediaries. The more theocratic colonies were committed to social order closely directed from the top. The legal profession, with its special privileges and principles, its private esoteric language, seemed nothing so much as an obstacle to efficient government. Theocratic means government where God is the leader. And one more quote from the same book. The Quakers of the Middle Atlantic were opposed to the adversary system in principle. They wanted harmony and peace. Their ideal was the common peacemaker and simple, non-technical justice. They looked on lawyers as sharp, contentious, and unnecessary people. For all these reasons, the lawyer was unloved in the 17th century. These attitudes from the 17th century were very strong in the 18th century, and they haven't really gone away. That book continues on from the perspective of leaders of the Bar Association presidents in stating that as we moved on, things became more complicated and the need grew for lawyers. Is it really that much more complicated? Are our lives really, seriously, much more complicated, even today, for what most people need to resolve in court? And if it's the case, is that because of liars? Is that because of the legal system? Or is it because we're really much more complicated today? Something to think about. Ward of the court, definition by Black's Law Dictionary. Infants and persons of unsound mind placed by the court under the care of a guardian. So there you have it. A person of unsound mind or incompetent to represent themselves, or someone who is represented by an attorney or other representative, or someone who has become directly subject to the authority of that court. So having an attorney means we're incompetent to represent ourselves. And at the same time, the attorneys have complicated our legal system to make it rather difficult, if not near impossible, to succeed without them. Before attorneys entrenched themselves in our government, we had already figured out what most of the solutions were for most of our problems. We may have been learning along the way, but so have the attorneys. And they have actually been making it harder, more complicated. We already had the rules within our society, what would happen if things wouldn't work out, and we took care of it. We didn't need to go to court and give all the money that we could have used to help support kids and each other over a big fight. But too often, it's all about money. As soon as you run out of money, your attorney usually runs out on you, right? Well, we're going to get into some of this, some more depth on what's going on with attorneys and the system. But faith teaches you, you better speak up. You better step up and speak up. Why? Because fear says, shut up. And the people who are abused, the first thing they've got to do, we know now, is they've got to talk about it. Find the right people and open up and talk about it like I did. And my biggest abuser, he's also one of my greatest teachers. So I wouldn't trade him for anybody. I've learned more from him than just about anybody. It's how I'm able to show you a lot of this stuff. I got more of the laws of peace out of that. I can't tell you. It's just added more clarity, more vividness than ever before to everything. It's amazing.